Happy Sunday. It's the end of February and the beginning of March, which means the days are actually getting longer and warmer, at least here in North Carolina. I wanted to share today some things I've experienced as an OR nurse when I was in an Auburn hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Some kind of difficult times, and I thought they'd be helpful to share for other OR nurses out there or anybody in healthcare in general. These are strictly my experiences, and some of the stuff I share that may have been concerning for me may not be concerning to other nurses. So with that out of the way, let's get to my first personal things I've witnessed in the OR. So believe it or not, I didn't know this was actually a thing, but you can actually do cases in the OR without a patient signing an anesthesia consent. And it has only happened to me once. We had an older patient who was going to get their great saphenous vein ablated, which just basically means they were going to get the vein eviscerated because the vein wasn't giving any support to their lower legs in terms of blood flow. And typically those are more of like a catheterization procedure. It's not really a traditional surgery. They don't open up the leg. All they do is the vascular surgeon will put a catheter in that would go into the great saphenous vein, and they would slowly eviscerate it on the inside and then take the catheter out and then just put like a steri strip on the site of the small incision, and that's it. Well, we had a patient that declined to get anesthesia, and when I was in the pre-op area, I was initially confused, and I talked to my charge nurse, and my charge nurse said, "This patient has refused to get anesthesia, so you are going to be the one wheeling them into the room and not only taking care of the circulating part, which is documenting, but also making sure the patient is okay during the surgery." And what was really interesting is during this case, not a single anesthesiology clinician, whether it's a CRNA or a physician anesthesiologist, none of them came in the room when the case started. That included during timeouts and during the procedure actually starting, etc. So that was kind of a unique situation for me, where every minute I would go to the patient who was awake and conscious and just letting them know that if they had any questions or if they were comfortable while the surgeon was trying to do their procedure and trying to eviscerate the great saphenous vein. They weren't able to get to it because the patient said it was too painful, and they ended up canceling the case right then and there. I just wheeled the patient back out to PACU and gave them a report. And then I used like my therapeutic communication skills and making sure that I was advocating for the patient. I was making sure I was there for them and obviously comforting them during this procedure. And they said I did a good job at the end, so that's really good. And that leads me on to my second kit. So I'm at Auburn Hospital. I had a particular surgeon that didn't get along with much of the staff, and a lot of people were scared to do cases with this particular surgeon. I was initially intimidated at the very beginning, but I slowly was able to kind of get past that emotional behavior that the surgeon imposed on other people. But nonetheless, I still kind of felt slightly uncomfortable doing cases around them from time to time. This surgeon would break out that a lot of people took to offense, and it really just damaged the relationship with that particular surgeon. Well, I was actually called in on this past Christmas Day, and we had to do an emergency gallbladder removal for one of our patients. And lo and behold, it was with that same exact surgeon. I was initially calm and focused during the procedure, but on the inside, I was kind of shaking a little bit, and I was afraid that something bad was going to happen. When you're on call during the off shift, meaning after 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. the next morning, you are by yourself. There is no charge nurse. There's no nurse manager. The only person that's in the hospital is the nursing supervisor, which I never saw come in the OR if you needed help. And unfortunately, the nursing supervisor is not equipped with many of the OR responsibilities. So really, it's just you and the scrub person. The case went okay. It was just initially I was very intimidated, and she did get off to a rough start, but after we made incision and we removed the gallbladder, I was able to go home and kind of call it a day from there. The lesson here is sometimes you have to do cases with people you don't like, or people that can be intimidating, or sometimes very rude or unprofessional with other staff. So you have to have thick skin is what I'm trying to say. And I certainly was able to demonstrate that. If I got nervous or if I got anxious, I don't know what would have happened that day, but Luckily, it didn't happen, and the patient was able to go back on the floor. Now I'm going to go to my third example. This one was actually a mistake that didn't happen because I was able to act very quickly. We had a patient from the GYN team that was going to get their uterine fibroids removed. And one of the doctors on their preference cards specifically wanted vasopressin, which is a medication that is a pressor and it increases your blood pressure and your heart rate. It's really used a lot in emergency situations. So this physician wanted a lot of vasopressin on their preference card. We ended up pulling up a bunch of vasopressin's medications into this one cup. And I think in the total it was about 200 units when it was really supposed to be just 20 units. And we even showed the GYN surgeon about this vasopressin, and she looked at it for 2 seconds and she said, "Yep, that's good, you can use it." But we were still uncomfortable. So luckily the nurse anesthetist stood up and said, "That is way too much vasopressin. This is the right amount you need to have," which was 20 units, not 200. And we were able to discard that vasopressin and get a new one in the right units, which ended up being good for the surgery. I did have to fill out a safety report, but the patient went home fine, and luckily we were all able to catch it before it was given to the patient, which was good. So it turned out a positive outcome. Last but not least, this next one. This was actually the most recent one that I can remember of. This was, I think, around mid-December, late December-ish, close to New Year's. We had a patient that was getting some type of tumor removed on their neck, and one of the ENT doctors came in and did the procedure, and I was actually assisting out in that case. I wasn't assigned to that case, but I was giving breaks and lunches in that room, so I had a familiar idea what was going on. This was the first patient of the day, and after that case, we all assumed everything was happy and good to set up for the next case. Well, it turns out later on the patient came back and they had a hematoma, and I can see the anesthesiologist coming in from the ED on the stretcher because this is an actual genuine trauma case. I wasn't assigned to that room, but I remember there was 5 or 6 doctors in there and 8 or 9 nurses. It was a huge emergency. Everybody was kind of panicking a little bit, but nonetheless, everything was in control, and I actually helped get supplies for that room. And after that, the patient went up to the ICU after they took the hematoma out. So I don't know what ended up happening to the patient, but I hope that the patient was okay. So those 4 stories are kind of the couple instances where I had some challenging moments in the OR. There certainly were other times it was challenging, but compared to these 4, I would say these are the 4 hardest ones that I've experienced so far. My hopes is that now that I'm an OR nurse in North Carolina, I don't really get to experience these again, or if I do, there's ways to mitigate it or prevent it and keep patients safe. And that's it for now. Many thanks, and cheers.